Hey guys, welcome back to Cuave Plays Games. The trailer for Cities Skylines II, the first actual gameplay trailer of real in-game footage, has dropped yesterday, and I'm going to go ahead and go through the video and share with you guys the cool stuff that's going to be coming out in the new version of Cities Skylines. But you can see all footage was captured in-game, and immediately, a lot of other people have talked about some of these things, so I'll try to be as brief but kind of detailed as possible. You can already tell that the roads look amazing. I mean, just these markings, the speed limit markings, the lane markings looks way better than any kind of vanilla road that you will find in Cities Skylines 1. This is the kind of thing that would take a ton of mods and maybe a ton of custom network assets and stuff like that to actually make it look this good. Okay, so in this one we see some interesting things. You can see a lot of the different zoning options, which is something we'll get more in detail with in a few minutes. But you can tell, like, this kind of area where my mouse is more low-rise, suburban, like single-family home type things. And then it gets a little bit more mid-rise apartment sort of complexes, little apartment buildings right here. And then as you get closer to the water, you can see there's even a step up from there. These are more higher density over here, and then of course downtown, sort of across this water passage. But it's a cool indication of the types of buildings that we're going to place. Like I said, I'll get more in detail with that in a minute. You can also see a gas station, which is pretty cool. There are none in the default version of Cities Skylines 1. You can get some on the Steam Workshop and whatever. I don't know if these are going to be functional in the new game, and if that's going to be like a new service you have to provide as gas stations or electric charging points or whatever. I don't know if that's a thing. It would honestly be pretty cool. I'd be for that. But, just something cool to notice right there. And then you can see in this little shot sort of the redevelopment of some of these areas, and you can see kind of what I'm getting at, like these different levels of buildings. You can kind of see them grow. Immediately, like, all of the buildings look way better than anything that vanilla Cities Skylines 1 has. Way more detail, like the windows and just the details of the buildings, these little billboards on top, way more detailed. This is a really cool shot of just, we notice a few little things about how some of the networks and some of the vehicles are going to work. So you can see right here, both a cargo train and a passenger ship train both look way more realistic, way less cartoonish than the original from the first game. And then in this shot, you can actually see a couple interesting things. First of all, there's like a micro roundabout, kind of where all of these roads meet. It's a lot smaller than one you'd find in vanilla City Skylines. But not only is it just a cool little small roundabout here, but this tram is actually going right through it, which is pretty cool. You can also see a cool university asset right here, which I assume is vanilla and built into the game. It's gorgeous. It looks like an Ivy League school or like Oxford or something. And you can see the reflections and the lighting, everything, just graphically, everything about this game looks far more realistic and far better than anything in the first game. You can see here, like, this sunrise too. Like, the lighting just looks far, far better. Like, you'd need a lot of mods to get this same effect in the original game. Okay, so now this is where the shots are going to speed up a little bit. This is our first real indication of what sort of the user interface and stuff is going to look like. And there's a couple of things worth noting over here, and I'm sorry that the YouTube play bar is sort of in the way, but if you look over here, you can see 167, and that looks to be sort of how you go to the global view to unlock your tiles, so that's at least double the size of maps in Cities Skylines 1, at least. 167 tiles would be a ginormous map, so hopefully there'll be a lot of room for building and kind of building big sprawling cities in the new game, which is super cool. You can see the UI looks tweaked. It looks very similar. If you've played the original game, you'll definitely be able to get a hang of the new one pretty quickly. You'll know generally where things are. That being said, it looks a lot cleaner, it looks a lot fresher. Some of the buttons are a little bit different. One of the things that I think is interesting is down here in the bottom right. You can see this kind of looks like a map, And one of my favorite mods for the original game is a mod called CSL Map View, which lets you take your city that you've made and export it as basically a map, kind of like something you'd find on Google Maps or whatever. And it looks like some sort of functionality like that may be built into the base game, or maybe that's how you see your transit map, whatever it might be. I have high hopes for that little map button. I have a feeling I'll be clicking that quite a bit. As far as everything else, looks pretty much to be expected. You have your budget panels, statistics panel, zoning, districts. Some of these things might be a little bit new and tweaked, but it looks pretty familiar to the original game. This part is really worth talking about. This is, as you can see, there's a lot going on, but the first thing that kind of jumps out is that somebody's making a giant grid of multiple streets at once. I don't know how much I'll really be using that, because I kind of like laying out individual streets, and I don't really like it when everything's just one giant uniform grid. But I can definitely see instances where this is useful, especially for things like industry and stuff, where or a downtown where a big uniform grid really does make sense. Could definitely be something super interesting. You can also see down here in the bottom left, we have way more functionality with placing roads and designing networks. So these tools you would need a couple of mods now to get, and they're all in the base game here. You can see that you can snap things to the ground, you can snap things, you can change the elevation super easily. There's way more road tools, including this new grid. So all of the things that you can do in modded City Skylines in terms of building roads should now just be a part of the base game, which is super cool. You'll also notice that these roads also have pipes built in underneath them. So probably no more having to design the water pipe network. Now it's probably a little bit more realistic, a little bit easier. Now they're built into the roads, which is super cool. And these also kind of look like aqueducts or something. I'm not really sure. I guess we'll have to see. This is another interesting shot. First of all, you can see more of these small roundabouts, which I'm talking about. This is huge. There are some mods that do this kind of in City Skylines, but having the ability to do this just in your vanilla game, just click on an intersection and say, I want this to be a small roundabout, that's huge. And there are probably a lot of instances where that'll help your traffic flow tremendously, which is super cool. Another thing worth talking about here is the street that they're building. You can see, if I play again, you can see that they are dragging the road through this street right here, which obviously currently there's not something you have to do. You can do. You have to go one street at a time and then build another segment. This is a really cool transformation shot of kind of laying out the street grid and then having it transform into the city. And you can see a lot of the cool detailed assets here too. A couple things I want to point out. The trees look really good. In almost every shot in this trailer, the trees look phenomenal. Way better than anything you find in the original game. Also, some of these harbor sort of industrial things over here look super realistic, super detailed. And all of these downtown buildings just look way better than anything that we would see. And these intersection markings right here, like, that is insane. The fact that that is part of the vanilla game is unbelievable to me. Like, that is something that would take probably, at least me, it would take me a good hour with like 4 different mods to get something even close to that. So that's super impressive. Here we start to get our first sneak peek at how zoning works and different types of buildings. And this is actually super interesting and something that I'm really excited for. You can see here, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, how there's different types of residential zoning. So here, this is kind of like your downtown city center, and this is kind of your suburb over here, and then you have intermediary stops or steps in between those different levels, which is super cool because I think that'll help create a more natural flow from skyline to suburb. It'll help make your city look way more natural and way more realistic, and that's something that I'm super excited about. They basically combined the idea of having the different levels of residential that they have currently and having low residential and high residential, and now it's just like what is that, 6? Yeah, 6 different steps, which is super exciting. You can see office, there's a low density office and a high density office, which is actually something we don't have now, so that's pretty exciting. Something worth noting, the offices are now purple instead of kind of that like light blue teal color. Probably a good idea, separates them a little bit more from commercial, it's a bit easier to tell what's going on. If you look at the actual types of zoning, you can see residential, commercial, industrial, office, and then we have something else that might be some kind of industrial thing. It's a little hard to tell. I can't really tell what that icon is. If you have any idea, let me know. This is another really cool shot, just showing us how road construction works. Again, you can see all of the tools that we have available. I've already talked about that. But just the way that this is measured, it looks a lot cleaner and a lot more... Everything about this looks way more scientific in a way. Like Cities Skylines 1 looks way more cartoonish and arcade game-ish. This looks way more in-depth. This is another really cool shot. You can see they're using this tool to build both sides of this bridge at once. And this is something that is really interesting. If you look at this university here, you can see that different parts of this are outlined. It looks like you may be able to upgrade certain parts of this building to add, for example, this extension with this little sky bridge, or these gardens. It looks like you can kind of adjust and change how you want some of these assets to look or function. You can see down here at the bottom there are upgrades. So it looks like you will be able to kind of attach new additions to buildings, which is super interesting. You have another aspect of that in this shot here. You can see this looks like probably the depot for trams is what I'm going to assume this building is, and you can see the players actually customizing the network going in and out of the depot. Like all of these little access tracks for the trains are actually being placed by hand. So that gives me great hope for for these assets being modular and having the ability to customize them to really fit the needs of your city, which is super cool. You can see here's another shot of the tram going straight through the roundabout, and then it kind of dissolves into this shot showing us how we can monitor our public transit lines. And some of this stuff is super interesting because you can see we can actually adjust the ticket price of individual lines, which is something I've always wanted to do, because maybe it would benefit your city to make buses more expensive than the metro, for example, or to make certain individual lines cost a little bit more than others just because they have a higher operating cost or whatever. That is going to be huge for anybody who likes to go in depth with public transit in their city. You can see you just have a really clean interface of seeing how the line is moving and how it works. This looks far better than the first game. This graphic showing the line on the left is super cool. And you just get great information on how the line is working, and you have different variables to adjust, and I think it looks great. Alright, here we have a cool shot just kind of showing some more of the lighting of this game. You can kind of see how here and here, for example, and here, the light is kind of peeking through buildings, and it looks crazy realistic. I don't know if they got ray tracing on or some kind of super powerful graphics card to really make this look especially good for the trailer. I'm sure that they are, but it does look phenomenal. This is something else that I found really interesting, is you can see here that individual buildings actually have addresses now, which is actually super cool. The ability to kind of create and design like an address system for your city is super interesting, because you can see right here, this is Hamilton Street. They're looking at this building here, which is 389 Hamilton Street. And then you get some nice information, probably not super different than Cities Skylines 1 about who lives there. One thing that is new, that is noteworthy, that I think is kind of interesting, is the wealth of the citizen that lives there. We kind of have that to a degree with land value currently, but this actually just kind of outright tells you if the people that live here are wealthy or if they are poor or what's going on, which I think is actually super interesting. It adds another layer of realism I'd be interested to see if wealth of citizens becomes a game mechanic, you know, if gentrification could become an issue, for example. Here's another example of the modularity that I was talking about in terms of your assets and buildings. This coal power plant just had one cooling tower, and they just added another one, which I think is awesome. The ability to make your assets how you want them to look and upgrade them so they work better. Somebody also pointed out that there's way more realistic upkeep for buildings now, which I think is pretty interesting. Hopefully the economy is a little bit more realistic in this new game. I'm not really sure if these over here are power lines or if they're train tracks. Kind of look like they could be either. But if the buildings are modular, it would be super interesting if you could, for example, put train tracks going into this building so they could ship and receive coal or supplies that they need to keep the plant running. Here we get a little bit of information about air pollution. It looks like this may be affected by wind and weather in the game, which is super interesting. And then this is another one that I find interesting too. If we look at the crime and the police, so we're going to need both jails and prisons. But there's also not only police coverage, which is what we have in the game now, but also crime probability, which is calculated by each individual home. And this probably all plays a little bit into each building having its own address and more information about the residents who live there. I imagine that individual houses and homes are going to play a higher, more valuable role in this game, which is super interesting. You can see, for whatever reason, like these houses on this cul-de-sac here have a higher probability for crime than their neighbors right down the street. And that's super interesting because that is something that happens in real life, and that adds a completely new layer of gameplay, which I'm super excited about. You can see also the way that traffic measuring works is way better now. So not only do you see traffic flow, which is how well traffic is moving through a certain area, but you also see traffic volume. So if you look at streets that are more, gray or yellowish, they have less traffic volume, but ones that are purple, you can see more traffic is moving through. And traffic flow is measured green to red, like it is currently. And then there's also a little graph over a 24-hour period what the traffic looks like. So I'd imagine maybe if you're playing with a day-night cycle turned on, there might be a rush hour, for example, like little peaks and valleys and how bad the traffic is. Maybe a lot of people trying to go to work at a similar time or go to school, whatever. Okay, so if we look at some of our farming mechanics, and it looks like that is what this last tab here is under zoning, is more advanced specialized industry. But you can see like farming is way more advanced and complicated than it is currently. There's chickens, looks like there's grains, carrots, cotton. So it seems that maintaining a food supply of some kind is going to be a mechanic of the game, which is super cool. And again, you can see just the trees, the foliage, just how good everything looks. Again, with seasons, the snow, you can see the smoke coming out of this factory, the way the wind is kind of pushing it this way. And again, the lighting, the trees, everything just looks fantastic. And then this, I'm sure, is just a 3D rendering. But there you go. Cities Skylines II coming out October 24th, which is a bit of a wait, but it'll fly by. I know I'm super excited about this game. If you guys are, let me know in the comments down below. Tell me what your favorite feature is. If there's anything I missed in the video, please go ahead and yell at me down below. Let me know what I missed, because I'll be super excited to hear about it too. Let me know what you guys are excited about. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.